It's time for our annual Big 12 preview. We're going to break down every team in the league and discuss what could happen this year in the best league in college football here today on ITG.
You are in the gun.
Because once you enter this family, there's no getting out.
I'm Schuyler Callihan, flanked by the signal caller Jed Drenning. We're going to get into a little look here at some of the other teams in the Big 12 Conference, talk some offensive defense, just some overall thoughts on these guys, where they could be headed this fall, who could rise, who could fall, all that stuff. Before we get into that, though, we're going to get a shout out to all of those who make this thing possible, starting with the fine folks at Toothman Ford, where we all know cars cost less in Grafton, to Rick Lewis and Fortis for roof performance and financial certainty guarantee. Be sure to visit fortis.us.com. To Johnston Equipment, Tim, Emily, and Bryce, and the rest of the Johnston gang on Route 33 between Weston and Buchanan. You can also check out their inventory online at JohnstonEQ.com. That's Johnston with a T. Book Exchange is back for the second year. I'm happy about that one, as they are back in the fold. Get all your Mountaineer gear and apparel at the Book Exchange. You can visit either of their two locations in Morgantown or the website at bookexchangewv.com. And our newest friends of the gang, Mountain State Brewing Company. Come on home to Mountain State, right near all the action. Celebrate the Mountain State way, right up the street from the Coliseum. We've got a weekly contest going on. You'll want to enter that for a chance to win your tailgate prize. Bunch of wings, bunch of food. They're going to get it all there for you, and you'll have a chance to win that every home game throughout the football season. So, Jed, before we get into our Big 12 breakdown, let's start here with a little bit of conversation with one of the new pieces of the West Virginia secondary, Kamari Wilson, a transfer from Memphis. This is an interesting pickup. Very hard hitter. He's kind of a journeyman at this point. He began his career at Florida, played as a true freshman there, played fairly well, goes to Arizona State, doesn't see a whole lot of playing time there, goes to Memphis, kind of rebounds, has a really nice year there, and lands back in the Power Four at WVU. And I really like this kid. I think he's got a lot of potential, and he's going to help this team out in a big way. We've heard from Nate Gabriel and some others that he's kind of been the vocal leader of this team on this side of the ball here early on.
Yeah, he's turned into a heck of a team leader for us on the defensive side of the football. And we talked in the defensive preview what he brings to the table as a football player. All right, he's long in the tooth. He's played a lot of football. I like the fact that his career missed tackle rate is lower than any safety West Virginia had last year. So he can be a force for us on that third level. What he said the other day, he was one of the players that was picked to have some dealings and answer some questions and field some questions from the media. Handled himself very well. He's just a well-spoken kid. He's a likable kid. He's an affable kid. But one of the things that he said that really jumped out to me was, I wasn't surprised. It was just a very familiar refrain. Kamari said,
the thing about West Virginia is, man, this is the closest team I've ever been a part of. It doesn't feel like we're just a bunch of transfers playing just to play. It feels like a family here, from coaches to janitors to cooks. We know everyone's name. We talk to everyone, and it's just like a big family.
Here's what I like about it. I understand what he meant because I've been through the grind as a player with Rich, and I can appreciate a sentiment like that. When you grind and you bleed and you sweat together, you appreciate all the little things, those fun, memorable moments that you're going to have forever, whether it's at the end of practice and you're going to have an offensive tackle lined up against a defensive lineman one-on-one on the goal line to see who wins and who has bragging rights. I mean, those types of things you remember and stick with you forever. But to hear a guy who is a vocal team leader say that this is the closest team he's ever played on, that was another remark he made. Schuyler, this is a guy who's played over 1,200 snaps. This is his fourth stop. So this isn't his first rodeo. He has a pretty large frame of reference in terms of what closeness might look like and, sometimes what it looks like or feels like when it's lacking. So for him to say that type of thing, even in this age of things being so transactional or leaning into the pro model, it's more about money than it's ever been. There are still some other things that matter to players. Being close-knit and being about the right things. Look, that's always going to matter when you truly enjoy the company of the guy next to you in the locker room. That type of bonding that relationship you forge, it matters not just outside the lines, but it actually translates to success inside the lines. I mean, there's an old saying that when you look at all the great teams, they were always close. Now, you don't know if it's the closeness that made them great or the greatness that made them close, but either way, that's very rarely absent from teams that have a lot of success. They like each other. They enjoy each other's company. And when it comes down to a tough game and you're in the fourth quarter and one possession is going to decide it one way or the other, it's going to be a key play or two key plays. And you know that you've been through the battles with the guy next to you and you trust and like the guy next to you. That does matter. What you're playing for. I'm playing for that guy next to me, and he means something to me. This isn't just a paycheck. He means something to me. There are guys in the NFL with that attitude.
Yeah.
So, of course, there's still going to be guys at the college level with that attitude. So, when you play in a league in which the margins are so narrow, like the Big 12, so many games, if you want to be a contestant, if you want to be playing meaningful football, and that cluster of teams that's playing meaningful football down the stretch in November, battling for a shot to be one of the final two standing to go to Jerry World and decide who wins this league, if you want to be in that cluster of teams, then you have to find ways to win close one possession games in the fourth quarter. That's the nature of this conference. And I'm a firm believer in the fact that the closer you are as a team, the greater your opportunity to win those types of games. I mean, I often said that we won a lot of close games when I was at Glenville. And a big part of that was I didn't feel any pressure on me because I knew, loved, and trusted the guys all around me. I knew somebody was going to make a play. Jed, just stay calm and do your job. Your job's not big. It's not that big of a deal. Don't make it bigger than it is. And I get to sit back and kind of sometimes I'd find myself kind of wondering. I wondered who's going to make this big play because we're obviously going to make a big play and win the game. We always do. I mean, we're obviously going to do that because I know my guys always find a way. Which guys are going to be this time? And I never really knew. Sometimes I was surprised by it, but I wasn't surprised by the fact that it happened because I knew those guys, loved those guys, and we were all about the right thing. So when you hear somebody saying the types of things Kamari Wilson is saying about this is the closest football team he's ever been on, he knows what it looks like when you're not close.
Yeah.
And he appreciates what it means when you are. That's what I read in that statement.
Yeah, and I think it's also just a high level of buy-in with this group of guys that are just coming from every which way. You could label them whatever you want, a bunch of misfits coming together or whatever you want to call it. I wouldn't go that far, but it is interesting to see how quickly they're buying into this vision. You hear a lot of these press conferences, even guys like Kamari said hard edge like 3 or 4 times in that press conference.
Yeah,
Said it.
yeah.
I mean, you can see that these guys are getting it, and they're going to need that. Like, Jameer Latimer is one of the very few guys outside of like a Ben Cutter, Nate Gabriel, Corey McIntyre who has played in this system under Zach Kelly. So to have somebody that steps out of their shell, be a vocal leader, even for a guy like Kamari he's new to this. I mean, there's guys that have been in the system a tad longer or been in West Virginia longer. He's taken this in this leadership role and running with it.
Our first year at Glenville, when we all transferred in together, it was Rich's second year. You know, they really struggled his first year down there. They won one game. They were shut out 4 or 5 times that year. The next year, I think out of 22 starting positions on the offensive defensive side, we had 16 transfers, 16 of us from a varying array of schools, whether it was WVU or Marshall or the junior college circuit. We had guys transferring from everywhere. So we didn't realize, well, everybody's saying, hey, you guys aren't very good. We're like, wait a minute, we just got here. What are you talking about? And so we didn't know each other. We were the original island of misfit toys. And that's what the WVU teams in the mid 2000s became with Rich and Owen and those guys as well. We didn't know each other from Adam, but we showed up and all of a sudden we quickly became super close. And we learned how to win together. And when you're going through the grind, side by side with those guys. And like I said, you're bleeding together, you're sweating together, you're surviving the craziness of Coach Rod together. He knows how to drive you like a good rider. He knows when to go to the whip. That's what Rich does. But he also knows how to cut loose in the appropriate times to back off and make things fun. And it's almost like Christmas. If Christmas was every day, it wouldn't be as special and you wouldn't appreciate it as much. But the fact that it's so rare and so meaningful when it does happen, boy, is it awesome. Yeah. Those fun moments are really fun moments, and they bond you and they do grow you together.
And probably the other thing too is we talk about this a bunch too, but the schedule, it sets up nicely, at least a lot more friendlier than it did last year. when you have this many new pieces coming together, if you can get on a roll early, all of a sudden this team's going to start looking around thinking, I mean, we may be able to do something special here out of nowhere. So that confidence can be dangerous. A young team that's gaining confidence can be very, very dangerous. So we'll see what it looks like here. It's going to get kicked off here just around the corner, September 5th against Coastal Carolina. But we're going to get to a quick break, and on the other side, we'll get to our first half of the Big 12 preview here today on ITG.
Nobody supports the blue and gold Mountaineers like Toothman Ford. With over 20 NIL deals and counting, Toothman Ford continues to rally behind our student athletes. And it's time we rally and support the dealer that supports the Mountaineers. Not only does Toothman Ford offer the best prices in the state on pre-owned, their never over MSRP campaign on new Fords guaranteed to save you thousands. Drive with pride all season long, knowing you're supporting the dealer that fuels our Mountaineers. Toothman Ford, where cars cost less, in Grafton and at toothmanford.com.
For nearly 20 years, Fortis has been the nation's leader in providing guaranteed roof performance programs for commercial buildings. Fortis offers roof performance solutions that feature extensive initial and ongoing reconditioning for commercial buildings as an alternative to traditional replacement, with long-term performance guarantees that are backed by global leader Lloyd's of London. Fortis offers a comprehensive range of roof performance management programs that provide financial security, extend the life of our customers' roofs, and make a significant impact on ROI. Fortis is currently improving performance and increasing ROI for customers at more than 4,800 locations, with more than 140 million square feet protected, including many Fortune 500 companies that have turned to Fortis to save money, gain financial certainty, and extend the life of their existing roofs. Fortis has helped customers save more than $520 million in capital roof replacement costs for an average ROI of over 250%. To learn more, visit fortis.us.com. Fortis, roof performance and financial certainty guaranteed.
Football fans, this is a tailgate giveaway alert. Wings, pizza, and cash. Mountain State Brewing Company in Star City wants to handle your tailgate needs for free and give you some spending money. The coolest contest ever is free to enter. No purchase necessary. Only at Mountain State Brewing in Star City, just down the hill from the Coliseum.
Back in the gun, it is time to get rolling here with our Big 12 previews. We're going to start with Arizona and work our way through Iowa State, and we'll take a quick break and then round out the last half here on In the Gun. So let's start with Arizona. Brent Brennan entering year 3. Year 1 did not go so well. 4-8 for the Wildcats, and I think a lot of people, even Arizona fans, were starting to wonder, even after just 1 year, was this the right decision? He wasn't necessarily lighting it up, so to speak, at San Jose State. A very disappointing year in 2024 with Noah Fafita and Tataro McMillan. But they bounced back, surprised a lot of people last year with 9 wins, 6-3 in the league. This is a very interesting team, Jed, that I think is maybe not one of the first 2 or 3 teams in that people think of in the Big 12, but I think could be right there in the mix with Noah Fafita, one of the best quarterbacks in the league.
Yeah, when you look at what he had to do, Brent Brennan went with a double coordinator switch after his first year in Tucson. And I think it was a couple home runs. First of all, we draw a lot of these notes. I want to give a shout out to Pick 6 Previews. If you're not familiar with that, Google it, because it is a great season preview magazine that covers all the power conference schools. I draw heavily from that with my team capsules that I do in my media kit to do my prep work for the Big 12. Yeah, 2 coordinators that were new coordinators on both sides of the football last year. Now, Seth Dagey, we're familiar with the Dagey family, an offense that added a full 2 touchdowns per game last year. And listen to this, Schuyler. You mentioned Noah Fafita. Noah Fafita became Arizona's first all-conference quarterback, first team in 50 years.
What?
The last guy at Arizona.
Oh, my goodness.
The last guy at Arizona to make first team all-conference was when they played in the WAC in 1975.
Holy.
Yeah, hats off. That was a great hire on the offensive side. On the other side of the ball was even stronger. Danny Gonzalez comes in. He installs the odd stack. They started really confusing the heck out of opposing quarterbacks. They had a star-studded secondary. They posted the #1 pass defense in the country as far as opposing quarterback ratings, 9 touchdown passes. They picked off 22 passes. But here's the issue. Normally, a 9-win team returning their quarterback would be enough to project you toward the top. But it was the defense that helped us turn around as much as anything, especially the secondary, and they lost that entire elite secondary. So they're rebuilding on the back end of that. It's difficult to suggest what that might look like. And then finally, they drew the toughest schedule in the conference as the only Big 12 contender to draw 6 of the top 7 teams.
That's brutal. Let's move to their in-state rival, Arizona State. Kenny Dillingham's going to have to replace Sam Levitt, who is now at LSU. They're going to, with Cutter Boley, it appears, the Kentucky transfer. Arizona State, 8th ranked transfer portal class according to On3. That's 33rd nationally. Defensively, and this is what we're going to talk about here throughout this thing, is a little bit of the portal class and also the overall snaps. Jed, I think this is just fascinating. Arizona State is the 5th most experienced team in all of the Big 12, but they're 19th nationally. And then defensively, you would think 12th most experienced team in the country. You would think they'd be number 1, right? In the Big 12. No, they're 5th in the Big 12. It's one of the oldest leagues out there. But Kenny Dillingham going to replace Sam Levitt with Cutter Boley. I'm very intrigued here if he can get back to where they were 2 years ago, or if they're going to be kind of caught in between.
Yeah, you mentioned Sam Levitt. Of course, he's off to LSU. And think back a year ago when Texas Tech was on the road at Arizona State, and Sam Levitt was leading that touchdown drive in the final minute of the game to knock off the number 6 ranked Red Raiders. Remember what Joey McGuire said after the game, the praise that he heaped on the shoulders of Sam Levitt? His quote was, I have it right here, "That quarterback changes everything. He's a difference maker." Boy, did that prove true, because once he was knocked out of the lineup, they were a fundamentally different football team. Jeff Sims stepped in, and he was serviceable, but he wasn't dynamic the way that Sam Levitt was. They ended up getting beat down by Utah 42-10. They lost another one to Houston. They suffered 5 turnovers in a 23-7 territorial cup loss to Arizona. So they faded down the stretch. Now, when you look at the 8-5 season, it might seem like a disappointment, but you probably should look at it through the perspective of a 2-year window that includes that 2024 title run. So within that context, it's been a pretty good 2-year stretch. And I think a big part of the question will be, can Boley, as a resource at Kentucky, played a lot of football for them. A big kid, 6'5", 213, former 4-star, played in 10 games for the Wildcats last year. Can he step in and be a productive force on an offense that really addressed its receiver needs in the offseason? They had a heck of a haul in the receiver room. Problem is, they lose 18 starters in the core of that 2-year run. They were 19-8 over the last 2 seasons. The core of that run is now gone. He reloaded a quarterback. How's that going to work out? We talked about the receivers. There's a lot of uncertainties. There's a lot of questions, as there are in so many of these rosters, especially on their offensive line. They too, similar to West Virginia, 10 new defensive starters. So I'm not so sure that they can make a Big 12 title run, but who was counting them to make a Big 12 title run 2 years ago when they were picked dead last? So I'm never counting Kenny Dillingham out, but that's kind of where they stand.
Talking about familiar faces, or familiar names, I should say. We talked about Seth Dagey, the brother of Jared Dagey. How about Jake Spavital, the offensive coordinator at Baylor? Dave Aranda, 4 seasons of losing football in the last 5 years for Baylor. They've got to get things turned around. Really, outside of that year 2 where they won the Big 12, it's kind of been downhill sledding for them. They've really got to get back on track here, I think, if Dave Aranda wants to stick there long term. They've got DJ Lagway in the fold now, the former Florida quarterback. Is that enough to get them back on track, Jed?
Possibly. Let's look at the situation that Dave Aranda finds himself in. 2 years ago, remember when they came to Morgantown and that offense was just hotter than Texas chili? You know, they got so hot down the stretch. They finished with that hot streak, and they had 18 starters coming back to into last year. So the expectations were really high, but they underperformed. Some things fell apart for them. And the way things ended up, they went 5-7. They were actually extended a bowl invite that they turned down. But you got to wonder, they changed ADs in the middle of November, and that might have saved Dave Aranda's job. But DJ Lagway, as a quarterback transfer from Florida, this has to work out for them. When you look at Jake Spavital's pedigree, I have confidence that it will work out for them. He'll find a way to get some production from this. But the question is, what is he surrounded by? I mean, that's a big question mark. Aranda upgraded his defense. He brought in a proven coordinator in Joe Klanderman to give him some help. But more so than anything, he shifted part of that NIL budget to the defensive side, and that was sorely missing. On the offensive side, Jake has to superintend a complete rebuild with 10 new starters. This quarterback situation with Lagway better work out. I mean, really, when you look at Baylor in the Big 12, during the Dave Aranda era, they're in effect a 500 team. They're 36-37, but this is you get a feeling this is a make or break type year for Dave Aranda.
It definitely is. And maybe not a make or break year for this next guy, Kalani Sitake. He's been 23-4 over the last 2 years. Now, there's some stuff that's going on out there that, people are wondering if he's a little upset with the resources in place because he has gone on record with that here recently. But they have done a lot in these last 2 seasons and have really kind of put themselves at the top of this league. And it looks like that's going to be the case again here as Bear Bachmeyer heads into his second year as the full-time starter. Was a pretty damn good freshman a year ago.
Yeah, and let's revisit where they were this time last off season. Remember, it looked like the sky was falling on Provo because they lost their star quarterback in Jake Retzlaff with
Yeah.
all the off the field issues. And the next thing you know, they're handing the keys of the offense to, as you mentioned, Bear Bachmeyer, who spent the spring at Stanford. So he has to transfer into Provo in the summer. You really didn't know what to expect. You didn't want to make of this guy. Well, it didn't take long to figure it out. His first game that he started when they blew out an overmatched FCS team 69-0, the opposing coach called Bear Bachmeyer a centaur. And you kind of knew what you were up for there at 6'2", 230 pounds. And I still think he plays bigger than that. He's just a physical specimen at the quarterback spot. Well, when they started the year last year, to say it got off to a hot start's an understatement. They scored in a national best 27 straight quarters to start the season. So you knew what the future looked like with Bear Bachmeyer under center. And they've got a cast surrounding him. So many returning players, from Offensive Player of the Year in the preseason, L.J. Martin in the Big 12, a high-end next-level center, and Bruce Mitchell. You got some guys on the offensive line. You got some guys in the defensive front seven, some specimens on the back end. Even in the special teams units, you got some guys. So they had that breakthrough 12-win season. BYU doubled down on a roster, and from a retention standpoint, they kept all their Big 12 players that were eligible to return this year. In this day and age, that is such a critical piece of what you have to do, is secure what you already have. No departing star players to the transfer portal. In fact, they even went out and added the number one ranked linebacker in the transfer portal to stack what was already a very talented unit. Their culture is rock solid. They're doing all the things on the right way. Both lines of scrimmage are stout. They're going to be a tough out no matter who plays them. They're a clear pick to be in the hunt down the stretch to be pushing for a spot in Jerry World. Let's see what shakes out.
Absolutely. Moving on to Cincinnati. It seems like 10 years ago that Brendan Sorsby was the quarterback at Cincinnati. It was really just last year. I think because of all of the stuff that happened this offseason, we just think about Texas Tech, but it's really Cincinnati that has to replace his production. They're bringing in J.C. French from Georgia Southern. They ranked 13th in the transfer portal class out of the Big 12, 16 teams. They are only 13th in the Big 12 in overall career snaps. So it looks on paper like it could be a bit of a challenge for Scott Satterfield here in year 4, but he has shown steady progress. It may not feel like it, but he's got 3 wins, 5 wins, and then 7 wins last year. A slow climb for Cincinnati over the last 3. What do you expect out of the Bearcats this year?
Yeah, it's been progress until the calendar flips to November, right? I mean,
Yes.
once again, last year they got off to that 7-1 start. They were so hot, they even cracked the Associated Press top 20. But then once things rolled into November, the wheels started to come off. We saw what happened 2 years ago with Cincinnati, and it happened again last year. Another 5-game skid to close out the year. They included blowout losses to Utah and TCU. They had a rain-soaked bowl loss in which Navy's option attack kind of just had their way, and they had no answers, Cincinnati defensively. J.C. French needs to work out. He was a productive player at Georgia Southern, played a lot of football down there, and that's going to have to work out for them. They're going to have to find answers offensively. They got a decent offensive line. I think there's some things they can build behind, and they believe in what they have at the point of attack up front. But they did overall lose 17 starters. These aren't the type of alarmist numbers that you used to have a handful of years ago. If you'd have told some of these teams 5-10 years ago you're losing 17 starters, holy cow, duck for cover. But how many times are we going to give a number like 16, 17, 18 starters now being replaced? As you touched on, the big thing is they did lose their dynamic quarterback in Sorsby, and their next wave of starters are mostly from the lower tiers. When you look at their talent acquisition, the means by which they're getting these guys in there, whether it's G6 schools or FCS schools, in some cases D2 schools, their talent level keeps them probably out of a title run. They're not quite to that point yet, but they do draw, from a scheduling standpoint, what's projected as 2 of the lower tier teams in the conference, and that's Colorado and Iowa State. But they also have 6 of the top 8, so that's going to be difficult. Let's take a look at how this works out for them.
Yeah, moving on to Colorado again, one of those teams that's really kind of looking like they're going to be another rebuilding team once again. It's been kind of a struggle for them since losing Shador Sanders and Travis Hunter and Jimmy Horn and all that talent that they had 2 years ago. Everyone talks about the quarterback play with Colorado, of course, because of Dion and how they like to sling it around. But really, it's got to be the rushing attack. I feel, Jed, since Dion has been the head coach there, their leading rusher, that the most that their leading rusher has had is 384 yards on the season. That has to change for this team to get back to where they want to be.
Yeah, they've had no balance or even a pretense of balance on the offensive side of the football that caught up with him to such a major way without the dynamic toys and tools in the pass game from 2 years ago when they won 9 games. But last year they slid to 3-9. And maybe the worst part was they featured a defense that was dead last in the Big 12. A lot of the media out there was on Dion in the offseason, but he doubled down saying, I don't doubt me. He landed one of the top coordinator hires this cycle, and this has to work out for them to have any kind of puncher's chance. This guy, Brennan Marion, was a hot commodity in coaching circles after the last couple years. He runs what's called the go-go offense. He's bringing it to Boulder. He was the head coach at Sacramento State for just a year, gave that up to come be the OC and work with quarterback Julian Lewis in Boulder because for all the things they're missing, Julian Lewis has an opportunity to maybe make something happen if you surround him with the appropriate pieces. That's the big question. Are they surrounding him with the appropriate pieces? We don't know the answer to that. But again, Marion was a very strong coordinator pick. Colorado signed a fourth straight top 25 transfer class. They did restock, at least they believe they did that receiver room. But to get to bowl season, they have to fix things on both sides of the offensive, the line of scrimmage. On the offensive side, the defensive side, of the point of attack, they've had some struggles, and they have to prove they can overcome those struggles.
Moving to Willie Fritz and the Houston Cougars, who did more than double their win total last year. They got to 10-3. Now, I think part of that could be due to the schedule last year. They got off to an easy kind of start there with Stephen F. Austin, Rice, Colorado, Oregon State. Then they ran into Texas Tech. They also had Oklahoma State on the schedule. Really, their two best wins, Arizona and Arizona State. They lost to West Virginia, of course, at home. Kind of a odd finish for them going 2-2 down the stretch, but this is a team that's, I think, right there in the mix for the Big 12 title contention. They're one of the oldest teams in the Big 12, third overall in career snaps, first in offense, sixth in defense, and they also have the second best transfer portal class. Plus, you got Connor Wegman coming back, a seasoned veteran at that key spot at quarterback.
You do, and this is a school that, after the transition year, Willie Fritz's first season when they were 4-8, they were still salty defensively, and they were playing a physical brand of football. They'd punch in the mouth. Even when they looked ugly doing it sometimes, when they were struggling 2 years ago, there was still something to them. And they started to put some pieces together last year, and they still deployed that physical brand of football. But it's a school that doesn't have a ton of resources compared to some of the other Big 12 counterparts. So they really have to hit in the portal, and they take what they believe is the money ball approach. And with that approach, they knew they had to be right in who they targeted and who they scouted. They placed an emphasis on experience, on battle-tested commodities with a lot of career snaps. That's a kind of a familiar trend that you're seeing with coaches looking to succeed in this portal era because we've seen teams do it, whether it's Indiana or on down the line. Now, here's where we know they hit. Houston put together a transfer portal class last year that produced 13 starters, and 8 of those starters earned all Big 12 honors. So that's how you hit. Yeah. That was productive. You talked about Connor Wegman. Connor Wegman is a legitimate, strong, big-bodied dual threat. He can throw the football. He can punish you with his legs. When you look at some of his numbers, he was productive, 25 touchdowns against single-digit picks. He wasn't turning the football over a lot when he was playing pitch and catch. He ran for 799 yards. Schuyler, he was double-digit with 11 touchdown rushes.
Yeah.
But here's one of the things that I looked at from a metric standpoint that really jumped off the table at me this year. And part of the physicality in the run game does force him to put the football on the carpet sometimes. He did have 10 fumbles. Not all of them were lost, but that was tied for the most in the Big 12. But listen to this metric. He had 525 yards after contact. That was tied with Vanderbilt's Diego Pavia for the most in all of Power Conference football. That speaks to the brand of football that he plays. They reloaded their experience level, and they still rank in the national top 10 of career snaps. So they're a battle-tested team. But They were 6-1 in one-score games. There used to be a metric in the Elias baseball analyst each year. The better your record was as a baseball team in one-run games, the more chance you had of taking a hit the next year because you couldn't replicate that. Well, sometimes that's similar in football with one-score games, and they were 6-1 in one-score games. That's difficult to replicate. Do some of those games catch up to them? Well, we have to see.
Yeah, I think a more difficult schedule will definitely have something to do with that as well. And let's round out our first half of this Big 12 preview with Iowa State facing a lot of change there. Matt Campbell, for years, had been linked to some other jobs, most notably in the NFL, turned those down or didn't really entertain those positions very much and stayed at Iowa State, continued to build. And finally, he pulled the trigger and went to Penn State to take over the Nittany Lions, who fired James Franklin. And they bring in Jimmy Rogers, very successful coach at the FCS level. Last year was at Washington State. But you look up and down this roster, Jed, it is a bunch of question marks. They've got a whole pretty much a very similar situation to what West Virginia had a year ago, bringing in a whole new team. 16th in the portal rankings out of the Big 12 teams, 16th in career snaps, 16th in offensive snaps, 15th in defensive. You get the point here. It's a very uphill battle for the Cyclones in 2026.
It almost makes sense as a starting point for Jimmy Rogers because suddenly what you just described as Iowa State now looks like Iowa State did before Matt Campbell.
Yes.
So it makes sense that they look the same way after Matt Campbell, right? You know, he was hired on December 5th, Matt Campbell was, by Penn State. Well, Schuyler, within hours, the succession plan was kicked into gear and they brought Jimmy Rogers in. And a lot of you out there listening, you might be thinking, who in the heck is Jimmy Rogers? I've never even heard of this guy. So let's talk about that for a minute. He was considered by the Iowa State administration and some others to be a rising star in the coaching ranks. In his first season as a head coach, he was at South Dakota State at the FCS level with a completely rebuilt roster. And he took them to a Final Four run with 12 wins. And that was following a 15-0 run at South Dakota State. And add to that, 1 year at Washington State, he brought in 70 new players, very similar to what we've had to do at West Virginia, and he was able to land a top 20 defense with 70 new players and take several playoff contenders to one-score decisions at Washington State with 70 new faces. Think of some of those games that Washington State played last year. Ole Miss, they lost by 3. Virginia, they lost by 2. JMU, they lost by 4 with 70 new players. So this guy can coach. Once again, the question is going to be, a lot of it's going to turn on whether or not Jalen Rayner can work out for them as a transfer from Arkansas State at the quarterback position, dual threat guy. What can he do? What's he surrounded by? Matt Campbell took no fewer than 15 starters with him to Penn State. It was a huge talent exodus, the biggest one we've probably ever seen at the Power Conference level. As many as 16 of Iowa State's new starters will be coming from lower tier, non-automatic qualifier or FCS or even Division II schools. So let's see how this works out when you add on top of that a double coordinator change with a new staff. John Heacock's retired. Matt Campbell's on at Penn State. It's going to be a tough rebuild for them. This is the absolute definition of having to string things back together from scratch.
It definitely is. West Virginia fans know all about that with last year and how that went. So Iowa State, you're ready. You might be taking your licks in 2026, but we'll see. Maybe some crazy things will happen for you. But we're going to get to our last break, and then we'll finish out this Big 12 preview with the last half of teams here on ITG.
From first light to the last job done, you need equipment that works as hard as you do. Coyote tractors deliver the power, precision, and durability to take on any task, big or small. And at Johnston Equipment, it's more than just equipment. It's service you can count on. With a full lineup of Coyote tractors and equipment, we'll help you find the perfect fit for your land, your job, your life. Because when your equipment's built right, everything else falls into place.
Visit Johnston Equipment today and come see the Coyote difference for yourself.
Get all your Mountaineer gear in WVU apparel at the Book Exchange. They're the locally owned and operated retailer with more than 90 years of selling everything you need for game day and everything else you need to show you're the ultimate WVU fan. Shop at their 2 locations at downtown Morgantown or Evansdale on Pattison Drive, or online at bookexchangewv.com.
This is the big one. Come on across the Star City Bridge and on up the hill.
Before kickoff or after a big win, stop by Mountain State Brewing Company in Star City, conveniently located on Mond Boulevard, right down the hill from the Coliseum. West Virginia born and brewed beers on tap, artisan pizza with house-made dough, dessert pizza for the kids, and the best wings in Morgantown, all making for the perfect family-friendly spot for pregame, postgame, or anytime. Come on home to Mountain State Brewing Company in Star City, right near all the action, and celebrate the Mountain State way.
Back in the gun, and it's time to round out our back half of the Big 12 preview, and we're going to kick it off with the Sunflower teams here, the Sunflower State teams, Kansas State, beginning with Lance Leipold and the Jayhawks sitting there. For a while, it seemed like Kansas was going to be steadily climbing and be somebody that would contend in the Big 12 potentially if they continue to get some big-time recruits and whatnot. But the last couple of years, I guess you could consider it a disappointment for the Jayhawks. I'd still think it's a success considering where they used to be. Back-to-back 5-win seasons. Finally, for the first time in about a decade and a half, Jalen Daniels is not the quarterback there. So they're going to have to figure that out. I think that's going to be a battle that's going to go into the season, Jed, with Isaiah Marshall and Cole Ballard. They have to get something there to establish any sort of consistency.
Yeah, speaking of Jalen Daniels, he's too busy throwing passes to Garrett Green now in the NFL, right?
Yes.
So if you missed that, but yeah, the honeymoon's over in Lawrence. There's no doubt about it. Now, if Lance Leipold, let's preface this by saying this: if he never wins another game as the Jayhawks head coach, he did one of the most remarkable things in the history of college football coaching.
Yep.
By bringing Kansas back to a position where it was a program with a pulse. No matter what happens moving forward, what he already did to get game day to Lawrence on campus to bring
them ranked.
They were ranked. They had a 9-win season 3 years ago, but okay, that's all behind you. In the here and now, they're coming off consecutive 5 and 7 seasons. It doesn't look as polished as it once did. Jalen Daniels, a difference maker at quarterback. You know, it seems like he's been around since the Reagan administration. He was the B.J. Daniels of Kansas football, right?
Yeah.
For those of you who remember the Big East
USF.
days with South Florida. One of the things in my notes, Schuyler, I do is I highlight what looks like to be the most established commodity at quarterback who's the front runner. And with all these other schools, I think I only have one name. I can't think of another school that I have multiple names. I'll let you know if I do. But with Kansas, I have 3. I mean, they say it's going to be Cole Ballard. He's been around. He's played in 15 career games out there, but 3 touchdowns against 4 picks. They have a Rice transfer and Chase Jenkins. They also have Isaiah Marshall, who was kind of a package guy for him last year. He came in and had 160 yards on the ground as a runner. So some combination of that is what they have to sort through to get the answers. What they've seemed to have lacked in the last couple of years is the killer instinct to finish football games. If we just said they went 5 and 7 and 5 and 7 in the last 2 seasons, they held a lead in the fourth quarter in 9 of those losses. Think about that, Schuyler. 9 of those 14 losses, they blew leads in the fourth quarter. I've never heard of such a thing.
That's insane.
They suffered, obviously, because of what we just said, plenty of losses in 1-score games with those blown leads. But it's only going to get tougher from here because from a 5-year recruiting stretch in the Big 12, they haven't fared well either. They recruited toward the bottom of the conference. So in-house, they haven't done it from the high school level. If you look at the last 2 transfer portal cycles, they've added just 1 4-star level player. The defense now has a proven all-conference, a couple at least, all-conference level players to build around. But there's a lot of uncertainties to call for this to be a team that's going to make it to a bowl bid. Now, the question I have is, what does this look like if they go 5 and 7 again?
Yeah.
For Lance Leipold. Do they hit the exit strategy here and go to another plan after this guy worked 10,014 miracles? They tried 100 other coaches who couldn't get them to where he now has them, as to at least you're a middle of the pack Big 12 team. Hey, that's no longer good enough. We're renovating our stadium. We're pouring all this money to football. I think there's going to be some accountability if he doesn't win this year.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you, 100%. And they're invested and finally putting some money behind football there. Kansas State, I'm starting to feel old now that Colin Klein is a head coach. I remember it wasn't all that long ago. He was playing in the Big 12 against West Virginia and lighting up, unfortunately, the Mountaineers defense and was in the Heisman conversation there. And now he's the head coach at Kansas State, back at his alma mater. This has to feel like a kind of, I guess it would be a kind of a make or break year for Avery Johnson. It seems like it's been there for him the last 3 years. You feel like you go into a season, this is going to be the year he really turns the corner and cements himself as one of the top quarterbacks in the league. And he just shows flashes of it. There hasn't been consistency there. Coordinator change, obviously, coaching change. Chris Kleiman, the surprising retirement, but I don't know if he, and he by Colin Klein, has enough to work with around Avery Johnson in this first year to allow him to take that necessary turn to get Kansas State back to where they need to be.
Yeah, he's going to need to be, and they've done their part in trying to give him a supporting cast at some key spots on the offensive side of the football. But, I've always felt, obviously, following a legend isn't easy, and that's what Chris Kleiman had to do. His predecessor and Bill Snyder walks on water as he
Yeah.
should in the Little Apple. But you know what? Following what I view as maybe one of the more underrated coaches in college football, ain't a cakewalk either. And I think Chris Kleiman never got the love that he should have got. I mean, he was a
Absolutely.
very underrated commodity with a lot of success. And so they bring in Colin Klein. And I always think of Colin Klein. You mentioned that 2012 game when they blew our doors off in Morgantown. What's this say about that 2012 West Virginia secondary, Schuyler, when
Ugh.
here's what I remember about it. I remember his stat line from that game. He was 19 of 23, 19 of 21, I should say. And I remember when the game ended, you know what I was thinking? Man, Colin Klein's not very accurate. That's what I was thinking. I was like, wow, he left some things on the table out there at 19 to
Yeah.
21. Yeah, he's done a heck of a job for himself. And he talked about the different head coaches who have influenced him, and he's played for some good ones. When, he was at Texas A&M, Mike Elko, obviously his history with Bill Snyder as a player. He talked about the impact that Chris Kleiman had on him as a head coach when he was on the offensive staff. But you mentioned it, Avery Johnson, now is the time. You have to assert yourself. You have to become a difference maker. You have to be all the things that you were projected to be as that 4/5-star quarterback coming out of high school. You've been a high end player. You've had your moments, but you haven't been elite. For Kansas State to get where they want to go, you have to prove that you're elite. They had a talent drain on defense, but I do think that they did a good job of leveraging the portal to answer some of those issues and address some of those issues, especially on the back end and the secondary. But again, on the offensive side, you have a quarterback in Avery Johnson who's legit dual threat. You have a workhorse running back. You have an elite tight end. That might put Kansas State a few moves up the ladder in the Big 12 to the best schedule draw as they avoid the league's top three teams. That's always going to be an advantage when you're not playing what's projected to be the top three teams in the conference from a scheduling standpoint. So let's see how things shake out for K-State.
Oklahoma State, the Mountaineers, Big 12 opening opponent. We're going to talk about them now. This has kind of been one of the, I would say, preseason or off-season darlings around college football. I guess it's just because of Eric Morris and what he did at North Texas with Drew Mestemaker and Caleb Hawkins and all those guys that he brought from North Texas with him to Oklahoma State. Everyone wants to draw the comparison to Kurt Signetti with him bringing his guys from JMU to Indiana. That's just a hard thing to do, but you can understand the reasoning behind it. Unlike Iowa State, who had their entire roster depleted and had to really just patch things up as best as they could, Oklahoma State's in a very good situation. One of the most experienced teams on both sides of the football. Mestemaker had a great year at UNT last year. But, Jed, the crazy thing about Oklahoma State the last 2 years, I know they've struggled, but it just dawned on me that they have not won a conference game since 2023. That is incredible. For their last 18.
It's pretty insane. And obviously, when you stop and consider historically what Boone Pickens meant to that program and his passing when he passed, really before the portal era kicked in, you have to think that him being around would have made a fundamental difference for what Mike Gundy could or couldn't have done in this new era of college football. But the end result is, for the last couple of years, they had their struggles. They had to move on from what is going to be in Mike Gundy forever a coaching legend and a playing legend. So for the first time since the 1960s, Oklahoma State hired an active head coach from another FBS program. You mentioned they bring Eric Morris, and they also like to think about it. When you talk to Oklahoma State people, their heyday, their salad days, most of those came with some version of the air raid being deployed. And that's what Eric Morris is. He's a tried and true air raid offense guy, a spread 'em and shred 'em guy. They want to get back to their roots of playing pitching and catch and shredding defenses. They hope that he can bring those things back to Stillwater. Gundy's best Oklahoma State teams, they did feature those Oklahoma State passing attacks. And I think that's what you're kind of looking for here. He imported the core of his number one ranked North Texas offense. You talked about the success that he had when he was at UNT. They're talking about already. It might be premature, but already they're saying Mestemaker might be a future first-round pick. What he did at North Texas can't be refuted, and he has really developed and have a feature back that was one of the most coveted commodities as a runner in the portal. Yes, they've stocked their roster with some talent, and they've plugged some holes from other spots as well. It will certainly be the most improved offense from last year to this year, but that's in part because the starting point and the bar was set so low by the struggles that they had. But still, they have to be considered somewhat of a dark horse to move up from dead last to the middle of this logjam that we talk about in the middle of the Big 12. But we've seen it happen in this league before. It wouldn't be the first time. It won't be the first time in the Big 12, but I think it's going to be a far more exciting Oklahoma State team and certainly a far more dangerous Oklahoma State team.
Now let's move to TCU. Sonny Dykes trying to get this team back to where they were just a few years ago, playing in the national championship game. They've won 9 games 2 years consecutively, but feels like they are a little bit of a disappointment the last couple of years after you get to the national title game. Jaden Craig, the Harvard transfer, is going to be looking like their quarterback for 2026. Interesting quarterback there, 60% completion throughout his career. Does a pretty good job of taking care of the football. What do you think about TCU in 2026?
I think they give themselves an opportunity. They have recruited well. When you look at their 5-year trend, they're right there with Texas Tech toward the top of the Big 12 conference. They've been a model of consistency, stringing together a couple 9-win seasons. Now, when you look at how close they were to having more than those 9-win seasons, a couple frustrating losses in each of those 2 seasons, but they had their moments. Knocking off a ranked Houston team, knocking off a ranked USC team. But again, each of the last 2 seasons that finished 9-4, they had opportunities to win 10 or 11 games, and they didn't make the most of those opportunities. But once again, so much is going to turn on how things work out with Jaden Craig and an offensive coordinator in Gordon Samus and what he can do with that quarterback from the Ivy League. Sonny Dykes obviously has a history of getting the most out of his quarterbacks, but let's see how they can separate and make some things happen with a strong offensive line. I think at the point of attack on both sides of the football, like some of these other teams we talked about, they have some potential, but that wild card is behind center. He was a star in the Ivy League, actually created some NFL-worthy buzz, so he was a bit of a commodity in the portal as well. So the question is, TCU might have enough to separate from the logjam, or do they not? I mean, if one of the teams is favored to do so, this will probably be one of those teams that is looked at as having an opportunity to separate from the pack in the middle of the conference and maybe push for one of those opportunities at Jerry World.
Has anybody talked about Texas Tech this offseason? I feel like they haven't been.
I don't think so.
Yeah, I feel like they haven't been in the headlines nearly as much. But the Brennan Sorsby situation, you have Texas Tech trying to get games going with their in-state rivals and this and that and the third and NIL and all that. So there's been a lot of off-the-field stuff this offseason with Texas Tech. And I feel at the end of the day, this is still going to be one of the best teams in the league and definitely has a chance to maybe take a step further in the college football playoff, even without Brennan Sorsby. Will Hammond is pretty damn good in his own right. We'll see what that situation looks like. I know we talked to our Texas Tech guy earlier in the year. It looked like he may have a chance to start the season or maybe miss 1 or 2 weeks. So we'll see what happens there. But very good on both sides of the football. It's still weird for me to say, Jed, that Texas Tech has a legit defense. It feels like not all that long ago they were giving up 500 yards every week. But here we are, Texas Tech, one of the best in the league.
And by not all that long ago, you just mean a couple years ago.
Yeah,
so exactly. It was really 5 minutes ago. But
it's amazing what money can buy.
They were strong at all points last year. When you look at the playoff era, there have been over 1,500 teams in the playoff era, but only 3 of those teams won 11 regular season games by 20-plus points. Texas Tech last year, 2018 Alabama, 2019 Ohio State. So that's the company that they're keeping. Cody Campbell, of course, doing miraculous things with the money that they're generating, and they're serious about what they're trying to build down there. And in the modern era of college football, it does take money to do that. They got a heck of a GM who they have a lot of faith in. You've had others come in and try and pluck him. Notre Dame made him an offer. He said, nope, I'm sticking here in Lubbock. When you look at, from a preseason standpoint, the love they're getting for a team that ordinarily you'd be looking at as a rebuild with all the talent they lost. But from a preseason standpoint, on both sides of the football and in special teams, there are just so many names that you could toss out here. But the question I have, and this is what I think will dictate in large part how far Texas Tech can or can't go. Yes, of course, Will Hammond is going to impact so much of that. And I do think Will Hammond is a special football player who can do a lot of things, both throwing and running the football to hurt you. I think he's a well-suited guy to run that system for them. And we've seen him in action enough to make some sort of evaluation there. But I really think that the bigger question is going to be, we just seem to take it for granted because they appropriately scouted, because they appropriately spent. Well, they're going to hit on these guys again. And it's just going to work out in the defensive front 7. When you stop and consider what they legitimately lost with those NFL caliber players that went so high in the draft in their front 7, you don't just automatically pluck new guys because you paid them enough from the portal. Now, you got a defensive player of the year candidate in AJ Holmes. You got Adam Trick, who people are looking at. it's not automatic that you just show up and put together that kind of production, but they are. It's tough to argue the level of talent that they have in all phases of the game. When you look at a scheduling standpoint, they actually avoid BYU, they avoid Utah. Their four toughest Big 12 opponents all have to come to Lubbock. Those types of things matter. When you're splitting hairs and parsing out who will and who won't be standing for the final two to go to Jerry World, a lot of people are picking them for obvious reasons to win the conference, and I think you're going to have to unseat them to prove otherwise.
Yeah, it seems like they went from being the Kansas City Royals of the Big 12 to the LA Dodgers overnight, and it seems like it's been like that forever now. But it's really only been 2 years that they've had this money. Really, 1 year where they've actually gotten to show that. So
You want a little factoid for some frame of reference, Schuyler?
yeah,
Over the past two cycles in the portal, the average Big 12 team has signed two four-star transfers. The average Big 12 team in the last two cycles. Texas Tech has signed 20.
oh my goodness, that's wow.
That's what money will do.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean they weren't getting those types of guys before. So that just shows you what this new era could be like for them. So UCF, as we get down the home stretch here, Scott Frost, again, very similar situation to Rich Rodriguez in West Virginia because he's going back to a place that he had a lot of success at, trying to get that thing turned around. I like the quarterback addition that they have there with Alonzo Barnett from JMU. Do the Knights have enough to get to bowl eligibility and maybe even then some, or is this still going to be a slow burn for them?
Well, let's start with this. Again, it's all about retention, right? That's the conversation we so often have in this modern era. Well, their writer for their Knights 247 website, he listed 7 players that were widely regarded as must-retain type players for this program in the offseason. These guys, 7 guys that they had to keep in Orlando for them to have a shot and keep out of the portal. Well, Scott Frost managed to retain all 7. So
Wow.
that has to be worth something. Again, this could be an upgrade at the quarterback spot, as you talked about. What he brings is something I don't think they were necessarily getting from, at least from a consistency standpoint, a year ago. And that might position them to return to bowl season. I mean, that's something that we have to talk about. But the other thing is, when you look on the defensive side of the football, Alex Grinch, think of all the indictments that have been tossed his way when he was attached to Lincoln Riley. But I have to say, his defense held up pretty well last year in the Big 12 at UCF. They finished number 4 in the conference. So hats off to him and what they were able to do, because they're also getting guys plucked, not just to the Big Ten and the SEC, but you even have in conference some guys. I mean, you had Texas Tech coming in there and taking one of their better defensive linemen from UCF. So hats off to them for what they were able to do on the defensive side. But there are still room to improve because they didn't have a lot of takeaways and some of those key metrics that you look at from that standpoint. But can they have that second year jump? That's something that we have to see. Bowl season, some people regard it as likely, but I think a lot of that's going to turn on a couple things. Can Alex Grinch's defense take the next step and start forcing some turnovers? And does Alonzo Barnett turn out a quarterback like you think he can?
Kyle Whittingham out at Utah. Morgan Scalley takes a step up, I guess we should say. I don't think we should say in. He's been there for forever now. He's been very seasoned and has a ton of experience in the building there at Utah. He takes over for his first season as the head coach. But I think we just kind of assume, Jed, that, and I'm guilty of this as well, that this is just going to be a continuation of what we've seen from Utah since they joined the Big 12 and what we saw them in the Pac-12 where they were winning Pac-12 championships. I don't know that that's necessarily a given. When these things happen, a lot of different things can come out. We could see how teams could be divided, or a person just may not be made out to be a head coach. I mean, there's a lot of different things that can happen here. But Utah also lost a ton of talent, especially off that offensive line that just mauled people for the last handful of years. 15th in the entire Big 12 out of 16 teams in terms of overall career snaps. They've got some playmakers like Devin Dampierre, quarterback, and so on and so forth. But this is a little bit more of a battle, I think, than what we're all assuming.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, a lot of this comes down to what do you believe and how do you look at this? Glass half full, glass half empty. Because a big thing that turned this around for Utah a year ago was the injection of blood in that offense, of this combination of quarterback Devin Dampierre, as you talked about, but also coordinator Jason Beck. Well, coordinator Jason Beck is no longer there. Coordinator Jason Beck is off to greener pastures, so they have to start from scratch again offensively. Now, you talked about the loss of the big bodies with their hands in the dirt. When you look at their offensive and defensive line, For most programs, you would look at the loss of 9 starters, all 9 starters on both sides of the football at the point of attack, as being too big of something to overcome. But their pipeline when it comes to developing big-bodied guys, the Samoans on down the line, they can plug and play more than most programs. But
Right.
here's the biggest thing I look at and the biggest question that I have about Utah. And part of me, ordinarily, when you have a new staff, a new coach, new things in place, you want to catch them early, right? Well, the way the schedule falls, West Virginia doesn't catch them early. In fact, we catch them in week 12. I might be glad that's working out that way, because here's why I'm looking at it like this. Coach and waiting situations are so often so rough around the edges and don't work out as swimmingly as you would hope. I mean, when you look at the history of coach and waiting scenarios, the batting average isn't very high. I mean, Jimbo was a coach in waiting at Florida State, won a national championship. Sure, no doubt about that. But for every one Jimbo, you find 10 that didn't work out.
Yeah.
And over the long haul, it's just, they're all different. None are created equally. But when you look at the scenario, as I understand it, surrounding that particular coach and waiting situation with Kyle Whittingham and Morgan Scalley, who was a longtime D coordinator there, he's dialed in. He's part of what they have going on in that program. He's part of that program's DNA. Morgan Scalley is a very Utah through and through guy in the same brand of football that Kyle Whittingham has brought to bear out there. So you'd think that, okay, that's continuity. That represents very little change. But a couple years ago was supposed to be the send-off for Kyle Whittingham when they first came to the Big 12, and the wheels came off. They suffered a lot of key injuries, especially at the quarterback spot. Next thing you know, they're fighting for their lives to win 5 games, and it didn't at all work out as the swan song type season that some thought it might for Kyle Whittingham. Well, he didn't want to end on that note. So he decided, hey, how about one more run at it? So I'm coming back for another run. So he reinvents what the Utes were offensively with a new coordinator and the new quarterback. And all of a sudden, they're dynamic, they're explosive, they're still punching you on the defensive side of the football. They're still physical, but now they're something else on the offensive side. And they're winning a bunch of football games. And they're one of the more dangerous teams in this conference, as they were projected to be when they first entered a couple years ago. And meanwhile, as that's all playing out, this head coach in waiting scenario has already been set in place and the wheels are in motion. Well, you kind of sort of get the vibe, and I've heard it from a couple places, that Kyle Whittingham might have sort of decided, hey, you know what? I'm not so sure I want to move on. I like what's going on here. Maybe I got a little more life in me. Maybe I can stick this out for a few years. Like, whoa. We already have this coach in waiting deal signed. We can't quite do that, which if you look at the time from the timing standpoint of when Kyle Whittingham was hired by Michigan, that's in keeping with how that unfolded. So if in fact there are some of those behind the scenes issues, which there may or may not be, I've heard from various people that there could be, then that might just get worse as the season wears on.
Yeah.
And so maybe if in fact some of those things are going to rear their ugly head, they'll do so by week 12 and we're in Salt Lake City on Black Friday. Whereas if you get them for the Big 12 opener in week 4, maybe it's not. The honeymoon's still on. They're still believing. They're still humming. Now they're working whatever new big-bodied Samoan dudes they got on both sides of the line in to smack you around. Devin Dampier's making plays, and they're still believing because there hasn't been that erosion that maybe there will be over the long haul. I don't know. That's just one of the ways of looking at it, and that's me looking at it from the outside, looking at it as somebody who wants to beat Utah. That's my glass half full.
Yeah.
Because what I don't want is somebody to step in like Kyle Whittingham did and have another 20-year run like he did. That's what I don't want.
That makes a ton of sense. And by the way, that's a late Black Friday night kickoff. Was it 10:30? No, 9:30 or something like that?
9 o'clock, I think.
Oh my goodness. So that one's gonna be fun, but we've got a long time before that. We've also got a midnight basketball game. Oh, it's just it's bad. But that's just college sports. So let's round it out with West Virginia. We'll run through the numbers here for your Mountaineers. 5th in the Big 12 in portal rankings, 21st overall in the country. 11th in terms of the Big 12 in offensive careers, in terms of overall career snaps, 4th on offensive snaps, 14th in defensive snaps. And I'm sorry, Jed, but I've got to take a shot here again at Oklahoma State. West Virginia's 2 wins last year in the Big 12 were 2 more than Oklahoma State's over the last 2 years.
Nothing wrong with that. Yeah, it's fun to look at some of those position groups, and we even have the breakdowns because CBS Sports and some others put those together, not just overall, not just – it's career snaps they look at. not just offensively, not just defensively, but they even go by position groups. So it's kind of fun to look at some of those and some of the outer extremes in the Big 12 with that. And I have that in my media kit here. But let's close with this, Schuyler. Let's visit some of the FPI numbers that ESPN put out before the season starts, their football power index, and how they project various teams, what the odds are to do X, Y, and Z. So, for instance, they list each Big 12 team, and they list your projected record, which is kind of like divided numbers. It's like fractions or decimals, I should say. But your percentage chance to win 6 games or more, your percentage chance to win your conference, your percentage chance to make the playoffs, to make the national championship. It's fun to look at this, okay? So, highest chance in the Big 12 to win 6 games, Texas Tech at 99.5. West Virginia, guess what the percentage chance they give us to win 6 games or more?
Oh, I did this article. I should know this. It wasn't even in double digits, was it?
46.5. It's the second lowest in the Big 12.
Oh, wait, you said the week to reach bowl eligibility. I got you now.
Yeah. To win 6. Now, Iowa State's the lowest at 41. Now, to win the conference, the highest percentage is given to Texas Tech, 45.9%. And there's a huge drop off to BYU at 16.5. West Virginia down there at 0.7, second lowest above Iowa State's 0.5. Playoff percentage chance. Now, bear in mind, you don't have to win the conference to make the playoffs. Okay, so West Virginia actually has twice the chance to make the playoffs we did win the conference, according to the FPI. 1.4% chance. Highest chance to make the playoffs, Texas Tech at 57.8% chance. Make the national championship game, Texas Tech the highest at 8.1. I guess we are a marginal 0. They have us and Iowa State at 0.0. They have UCF, Kansas, and Oklahoma State at 0.1. They have Colorado and Arizona State at 0.1. So they're trying hard to get us to 0.0 when you do that.
I mean, you got to give them at least a decimal or something. I mean,
win the national championship. What do you think Texas Tech's percentage chance to win the national championship is?
Is it even in the 30s or 20s?
No.
No, I don't even think it's that high, actually. I was going to say 14. I'm going to say 8%.
3.5.
Wow.
They're the only team in the Big 12 that is given at least a 1% chance.
I was crazy for thinking even 30. Goodness.
BYU's number 2 is 0.7, and nobody else has higher than 0.1.
Wow.
Yeah, so, which we will get into, as we flesh this out and look at what the Big 12 needs to do from an opportunity standpoint. But that's fun to look at.
Yeah, it definitely is. West Virginia offensive line, one of the most seasoned in the country, of course. You have the nation's leading rusher in Cam Cook and some other intriguing pieces as well. We'll see how the defense turns out. But we have an offensive preview. We have a defensive preview, a special teams preview. We have Cam Cook breakdowns also in the hopper and on the channel. We also have a Michael Hawkins and Scotty Fox breakdown, 2 parts, running and passing. So a lot of things for you to catch up on as we get up into the season. And heck, we may be watching this episode as you're making your way up to Morgantown for the Coastal Carolina game here, whenever that comes up, and maybe you're going back and watching episodes. Go back and check all that stuff out as we get ready to start the 2026 season. So there you have it, our Big 12 preview now in the books. We are getting closer to kickoff. So for Wes, for Owen and Jed, I'm Schuyler Callihan. The last thing we ask of you is to be an ear and tell an ear about your new favorite WVU football podcast. Take care, everybody. You've been in the gun.
ITG.
The fun doesn't have to stop here.
Be sure to hit subscribe and never miss an episode.
If you have any questions, suggestions, or feedback,
be sure to follow us on X at In the Gun Podcast.
Join us again next time.
Until then,
tell an ear to tell an ear about your new favorite WVU football podcast.
This mission is over. It's over.